Presently, it seems that lives have fallen into pleasant places for the ruling All Progressive Congress, the APC. The decision of the ruling party to zone its presidential ticket to the southern part of the country might have put the opposition People's Democratic Party, PDP, in a quandary for contemplating to leave its own ticket open and by implication put the North at advantage. But the Bauchi State Governor, Bala Mohammed, yesterday reinforced the PDP's position when he declared that the zoning of the presidency to the south by the ruling party posed no threat to the main opposition party ahead of the 2023 general elections. Unfortunately for the PDP, the APC seems to be playing a smarter card, given the current mood of the nation, and especially because while most of the governors in both parties wanted power to shift to the south of Nigeria, the governors, being the life of the political party, are consciously walking to the answer. However, the possibility that the PDP might still go south is high because once the party had zoned its chairmanship to the north, it is only ideal that the presidential ticket is taken to the south, a situation that will further give the APC an advantage of southern votes. Political calculations full swing going on here, Tundu.
Well, yes, of course they are. It's that time that we are in the political season. And yes, APC hasn't formally said anything about zoning the presidential candidacies to the south, but it does appear from their zoning formula that it's headed that way. Although you'll recall when PDP announced their consensus national chairman, Dr. Yocha Ayu, it did say that they're leaving things open, and if a presidential candidate does emerge from the south or from the north, that he would have to step down. So it remains to be seen exactly where APC is going. But just from all indications, if we're reading the tea leaves, it does appear that they're going to zone their presidential candidates to the south. As for Bala Mohammed, the governor of Bauchi State, well, of course, he would want PDP to throw it open because of his personal ambition. And there's several others that have a personal ambition from the north who would obviously prefer that route. But PDP should be mindful of lessons from history, where as a result of people's personal ambitions, they entirely missed the zeitgeist and it cost their party power. And every political party is in the business of power. You're not hoping to become the opposition. PDP just might drop the ball. I don't think in my entire lifetime Nigeria has been more, I'm trying to find a polite word, I can't. What we really need now is unity. What we really need is that everybody feels that they have a level playing field in this country. The idea of yet another northern president for another 8 years is repugnant to vast swathes of the Nigerian populace at this moment. PDP will have a tough time trying to justify it. And of course, we've read all these rather dissuasive arguments with all their little calculations that make no sense whatsoever, quite frankly, about how in the life of the Fourth Republic, the North has only been president for such a short time, and it's mostly been Southern presidents. And we're not talking about the Fourth Republic. We're talking about since the advent of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. That Northern domination is a fact that cannot be argued. It is just a fact. And it's always so interesting that the whole North-South handing over of the baton is quite smooth and seamless, unless it's time for a Southerner. That's when you get all these arguments. So it does seem to suggest a sense of entitlement, and that is exactly what a lot of people in the South reject, including the Southern governors from both parties, from both major parties, completely reject that, and they are calling for a Southern president. And these calls cannot be ignored, really, or well, ignore them at your own peril.
Dr. Batu?
Well, political parties are organized to win elections, to gain power, not to just go on a jamboree. If you go on a jamboree and you don't win power, then the politics, the purpose is defeated. So I imagine that the People's Democratic Party will be reading what is happening across the aisle in the All Progressives Congress. Because what is clear now is that the APC has effectively zoned its presidency to the south. The APC may have issues in terms of where power will go in the South, where the candidate will come from. And that will be a battle for the South. It will no longer be a battle for the northern leaders of the party. And that signals a determination on the part of the All Progressives Congress to hold on to power in 2023. So the ball is in the court of the People's Democratic Party. How do they play that ball? Will they score an own goal, as they did in a different fashion in 2015 because the PDP practically lost the election because it scored an own goal, shot itself in the foot. One of the reasons, not all the reasons at stake. So I imagine that with what we have heard from some of the PDP leaders that have been on this program, specifically Chief Olabode George, who are here, is also interested in the presidency, and also Elder Emmanuel Ogidi, who said at the time the issue came up from Kwankwanso, from Bala Muhammad, the governor of Bauchi State, that the PDP was going to have a level playing field. Both men, who are also key stakeholders in the PDP, said that the party was still negotiating and discussing, and that nothing was cast in gold. So we cannot say definitively that on the basis of what Bala Mohammed has said, that therefore the PDP is going to zone the presidency to the north. If the PDP were to do so, that would be a very bad strategy, a very bad way to play politics, because the party will just automatically alienate, majority of the electorate within the southern province of Nigeria. The second point has to do with the political parties. Now, in all of this conversation, we've been talking about just PDP, APC, because they are the two dominant political parties. And yet, INEC has on its register over 50 political parties. Nobody is worrying about those ones. So we have witnessing a situation where Nigeria is gradually emerging as a two-party democracy after the fashion of what exists in the United States. But what is interesting is that ahead of this 2023 election now, you now have a force, a third force, led by Senator Rabiu Kwankwanso, Buba Galadima, and others, who say that they want to provide an alternative to the PDP and the APC. There are some other politicians too. There is a group led by Professor Patu Tomi and others, Ulisa Agbakuba inclusive, who are also saying Nigeria needs a third force. Now that third force, that coalition, is it likely to emerge? Is it emerging too late in the day? Do they have enough time to be able to mobilize the structure, the resources, to be able to challenge these two major political parties? But we'll see. We have heard that there is a third force that is coming together. Because as it is, we thought previously that third force will emerge out of the APC, but the APC appears to have close ranks. And I imagine that the strategists in the PDP are not oblivious of this. So at the end of the day, I guess reason will prevail. Bala Mohammed saying, this is what the PDP will do, a level playing field. No, he's not in a position to dictate to the party the direction in which the party will go. Because the party has a hierarchy, it has a board of trustees, it has the owners of the party. And it's at that level that a decision will be taken at the end of the day. And I imagine that there will be enough enlightened persons in that board of trustees who will say, no, we shouldn't go this way. Otherwise, we will have lost, the party will have lost the election even before the election. And if they make that mistake, nobody should come around and say APC rigged the election. No. If they get their strategy wrong, then, of course, they know the cost.
Dr. Batia and Tundabi, both of you are very spot on, on this analysis. And I would like to quote popular music artist Olamide, Naira Marley, that says, own goal is a goal. And it is incumbent on the PDP to understand what Naira Marley said in his popular song, It's a Goal. He said very famously, own goal is a goal. The question is, in whose goalpost are they scoring that goal? Like you said rightly, the fact is there's a general zeitgeist that power must return to the South. No matter any argument being enunciated by different groups because of the South-North rotation. President Buhari has just done 8 years. It will be unfair for power to return to the North. The PDP, after having zoned the leader, the party chairman, and which is always the convention, that once you zone the party chairman to a certain region, then the opposing region gets the presidency. Then they came forward to say that oh, we are going to leave it open nationally. And let's not forget that there are fractures in the PDP itself. A couple of southern governors had a meeting led by Agwai in Enugu, and they all unanimously said power should go to the south. The PDP in the center reneged against the agreement at that meeting. There have been a lot of factions in the PDP. So if they are going this way, the PDP should be reminded that an own goal can be a goal. It will be counted. I have not seen anywhere in football that an own goal is overruled. You can ask Pablo Escobar even more for clarity on that.
He died, didn't he?
Yeah. Secondly, we have to understand that there are going to be many third forces, Dr. Abati. We have seen the one for Kwankwaso. I will call that third force 3A. There's another one coming up soon that at the end of March, they'll have their meeting and round things up. ZLP, couple of other parties, that's third force 3B. There'll be more splinter groups. But the question is, can they really pull the muscle? Can they really pull all the resource to be able to upscale these two big parties? Because the truth is, we like to deceive ourselves too much in this country. Nigeria is predominantly a two-party state. It's either the APC or the PDP. We want more inclusive democracy. We want all the parties to count. But as it is today, that's the order of the day. What other people are calling for is, why can't we have a coalition of all these forces to make one strong, solid third force? Is that possible? I doubt it. Because when you look at and look to the thread of these forces you are seeing, it's about, oh, my personal agenda, my personal ambition. There's always somebody at the top of the ticket of that third force. Everybody's campering for that. So this leaves us in another dilemma. And the question is, who now gets to speak for the people? Because in all of this, the politicians are doing what suits them. It's about their interests. And the recurring decimal in our politics is, I don't hear too many times who gets to speak for the people in all of this. It's not about the issues. It's about, oh, what satisfies their needs. And that's the state of play in our democracy yet again. So there are going to be many other thought forces. If that's the case, the PDP is well on its way to shooting itself in the foot. The APC might have zoned, but they have not come out categorically, like you said, to say that we have zoned this to the southwest. It's still open. Things are still fluid.
Often said, the PDP story is a developing story.
Okay.
We have to leave that window open. And I think the catch here is that Dr. Yoche Ayu said that should the party decide to pick its candidate, presidential candidate from another zone, he will be willing to resign. Okay. And I guess he will keep his word. Okay. Because the Board of Trustees will tell him, well, this is the new arrangement. And he will have no option but to step down. But, you know, both major parties are watching each other. I don't think anything is cast in gold yet. But with APC, there's some certainty that the party can work with.
Okay. Russian President Vladimir Putin, in the early hours of Thursday, announced a special military operation in Ukraine. In a televised address, Mr. Putin claims it intends to protect civilians in the separatist region of Donetsk and Luhansk and told Ukrainian forces to retreat. He said the action is in response to threats coming from Ukraine, adding that Russia does not have a goal to occupy Ukraine. Meanwhile, in an apparent warning to the United States and NATO, Mr. Putin declared that any attempt to interfere with the action will lead to, quote, consequences you have never seen before in your history. We're now being...
Circumstances require firm and immediate actions from us. Donbass's People's Republics asked for help from Russia. In this regard, according to Article 51 Part 7 of the United Nations Charter, with the consent of the Russian Federation Council and in accordance with the ratified agreement on February 22 of this year on friendship and mutual aid with Donetsk People's Republic and Luhansk People's Republic, I decided to conduct a special military operation. Its goal is the protection of people who, during 8 years, suffer from abuse and genocide from the Kiev regime. We urge you to lay down your arms immediately and go home. I will explain. All servicemen of the Ukrainian army who comply with this requirement can freely leave the area of military actions and return to their families. Whoever would try to stop us and further create threats to our country, to our people, should know that Russia's response will be immediate and lead you to such consequences that you have never faced in your history. We are ready for any outcome. I am confident that loyal soldiers and officers of Russia's armed forces fulfill their duty professionally and courageously.
Right, Tundu, war has started.
It has, all the saber rattling, and now we're actually seeing shelling. And there are already reports of deaths, unfortunately. It's as Biden said, Putin has chosen the path of destruction and bloodshed, he said. But hopefully, it can all be, quelled before it goes too far. The one good thing is that we are told that it's only a first tranche of sanctions that has been announced so far by the US, the UK, the EU. Or do I really count the UK? Because what was that? Those weren't really sanctions. I'm sorry. I'm not going to count the UK here. But we're told that that will be escalated incrementally. And I do hope so, and quickly, so that this can end. Because what we're talking about really is about lives. That people, human beings are going to die for no apparent reason. And it's always been said that Putin was going to plan some false flag operation and claim some kind of provocation. So what he has now done is claim that the separatists in 2 regions have actually invited Russia to come and defend them. Does that hold water? Of course not. No. But he doesn't care. He's been looking for any excuse to go in there and kill people, and Russian troops as well will die. So hopefully those sanctions will work, because that's the only thing. From day one, and I think this was a mistake on the part of the US and EU, they did say that there will be no boots on the ground. They're not sending in their troops to die. With somebody like Putin, you don't announce that and then negotiate with him, across those very long tables that we saw. When that is not an option, sending in their soldiers to possibly die in this fight, the only thing we have going is sanctions. And will that sway a man like Putin? Sanctions will cripple Russia's economy. Although I have to say, Putin has been quite organized in the past 5 years. He has so many firewalls to protect Russia against sanctions. But even if at all the impact is felt, it will not be felt by him personally. It will be felt by the people. And is that enough for somebody like him? I doubt it.
Okay, fine. What this indicates, first, is the failure of diplomacy. Ahead of this, our expectation was that diplomacy will help to save the situation, but it has not. At the moment, most of the Western allies have stopped talking to Putin. Only France and Germany are still making the effort against all odds. But one thing that should be noted is that it looks like, Vladimir Putin was prepared for this all along. In 2014, when he attacked Crimea, sanctions had some effect. In 2014 also, he attacked Ukraine. Okay, so he has had some significant experience. Yesterday, there was some talk about the international, financial market system. But since 2014, Russia had pivoted away from the West. In 2014, the international reserves of Russia domiciled in the U.S. was 40%. It's down to about 16%.
Yes.
Now, Russia has moved towards China. It has a China strategy. So today, its currency, its foreign reserve in Russia alone is about 13%, tied to the Chinese renminbi. Okay? So, and in terms of, efforts to protect itself, China, the world's largest gas station, as I said yesterday, and the second largest supplier of crude oil to the world after Russia. Yes, sanctions may affect it. It may feel short-term pain. Some of his billionaires have been targeted in the UK. But targeting the billionaires in the UK, I think about 3 of them or so. 3. Yeah, these are people who are playing big in the property market in the United Kingdom. So even the UK people themselves will be affected. Okay? The banks, 5 banks in Russia have also been, sanctioned. They've been blacklisted. Okay, yes, Russia may feel that short-term pain. But for a country that has an international reserve of about $630 billion that is spread widely across, many zones, it will take a while. So Putin knows that he can stand up to the international community for a while, maybe 2-3 years. So would the Western allies, would they be able to hold out for that long? So there'll be losses on both sides. Germany has halted the Nord Stream 2 gas pipeline. Okay, so Europe will not have gas from Russia, but Russia has a big market, worth over $100 billion in China. And when Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin met recently, ahead of the Winter Olympics, there was that accord. And China, of course, will not vote against Russia in the Security Council. China may even invoke the veto. And then these, sanctions that I have talked about will depend on the resolve of the Western allies. And so they must be ready for a very long haul. The other thing that we have seen in this is that with Brent crude now going up to about $100, and it may go higher on account of this tension. Import-dependent countries, are we not import-dependent? We produce Brent crude, we export it, we bring it back.
Shameful.
PMS prices in countries like Nigeria will go up. If this war continues, before you know it, we'll be paying 500 or 400 naira or more per liter for fuel because we're vulnerable. Maybe the UK may not be as vulnerable. 30% of its gas comes from Russia. I guess most of its gas from the North Sea, from Norway and that axis. But you see, there will be impact. And the inflation will go up. Central banks, we need to tighten their policies, their monetary policies. So the whole world is going to suffer from this, and that's why, Brent crude selling at 100 naira dollars per liter is not in the best interest of a country like Nigeria. We can't even meet our quota, right? Our quota is 1.7, but we managed to do just about 1.4. We have a shortfall about 300,000 barrels or so, or 300 million. 300,000 barrels. Finally, it is clear that Vladimir Putin cannot be relied upon. The man lies like, I don't want to make a comparison, but he lies. He told us that he's going to do peacekeeping. No, that's not true. That's nonsense. Okay? He says nobody will be attacked. That is not true. We have had that there have been invasion, incidents in Kiev. So this is the problem.
But can I just ask, what happened? Because China joined the rest of the world to oppose Russia when they invaded Crimea. And today, this is when I have this bromance.
No, it's
where's Kissinger when you need him? No, but America was always very specific. Keep Russia and China from becoming
we have to cross to Kiev. Maybe we'll come back to that.
Yeah, I mean, a lot to unpack.
During newspaper review.
All right, that's all on News Headline. We'll take a short break. When we return, we'll have Rotus, we'll have Michael, we'll have Adeso and Aaron to give us updates on Africa, global business, COVID-19 and sporting activities across the globe. Stay with us.
Welcome back to the Morning Show here on Arise News. For Global Business Update, Michael Wilson joins us now from South Africa. Good morning, Mr. Wilson.
Good morning. We're facing what could be the largest conflict in Europe since the Second World War. So, unsurprisingly, the market's actually in decline. As far as Asia Pacific, the Nikkei down about almost 2%, South Korea down about 2.6%, and so it goes on. And I suspect that will sort of continue for a considerable amount of time. The only relatively bright spot is the Shanghai Composite, which fell less than 1%. But basically, all markets, as you probably imagine, going down. Was the Hang Seng biggest loser, down about 3%. And shares of the Chinese artificial intelligence firm SenseTime. When we talked about it yesterday, those shares have risen because of their in a Hang Seng Tech Index, but the actual amount of it is much smaller than people actually thought, and therefore those shares are declining. Just a little bit of corporate news out of China before we hit the big stuff. There's an upstart telecoms company called, I think, I'm going to pronounce it Realme. It's Realme. Realme looks set to take it. They want to take on Apple and Samsung as far as smartphones are concerned, and they want to grow to 85 million units by the end of 2022. Right, let us recap what happened on Wall Street yesterday. And as you can imagine, that initial kind of boost that we had yesterday when the sanctions were very, very weak indeed. That optimism did not last throughout the day. Dow futures overnight down, as well as the Dow itself overnight down 719 points. President Joe Biden has obviously condemned Russia, saying that the rest of the world will hold Russia accountable. In regular trading sessions, as I said, down about 480 points, the Dow. And stocks have struggled recently and will probably continue to do so. Let's turn our attention to how all this may affect supply chains. We've touched on this subject. There's a bit more. I mean, it's a really day-by-day subject. But Russia's also the world's top wheat exporter, and it also exports to China as well. So, and it also to Africa. And it could be that that's going to add to food prices actually going up. Russia and Ukraine are also big suppliers of metals, like metals to and other commodities to other markets as well. So it could be that that's going to be hitting many nations in the Middle East and Africa. Not so much worried about the metals, but certainly worried about that food inflation. Nickel, obviously, a key raw material as far as electric cars concerned. So it's all about interconnection. Even the US chip industry, which is trying to onshore to make it have an independent future away from all these supply chains, needs these kind of metals as well. As far as the UK is concerned, and I think you'll probably find this at your local stations as well, pump prices are at record highs and setting records every day. We're approaching £1.50 per litre for petrol, and clearly those oil prices have jumped as the wholesale price of oil has jumped too. By contrast, the Chancellor, Rishi Sunak in the United Kingdom, although national insurance is going up in April and although there are tax rises in the future, overall he's hoping to bring down taxes as far as the UK is concerned, but that won't happen for the moment. He's trying to do it in a sustainable way, which suggests to me it's a long time off. The UK Bank of England Governor Andrew Bailey, meanwhile, has also been admitting that inflation is actually rising much faster than they had originally thought. He thinks, though, it will peak at about 7.25% in April, when all those household energy bills, some which will increase by over 50%, are brought into the calculation. But from then on, he hopes that interest rates will gradually remain on hold, because what they don't want to do is strangle the recovery. That's a bet that all central bankers and all chancellors have to actually take on board. Rio Tinto is worth noting. It's delivered the second largest ever payout in UK corporate history because of the biggest one was Vodafone, that was in 2014, for the rising price in commodities, which takes us neatly onto the oil, which has pushed through $1 per barrel thing overnight. About 106 was actually the first one, up about 4% yesterday. Spot gold as well. Gas prices have surged because of Germany halting approval of the Nord Stream 2 gas prices, and Russia and aluminium and nickel also up as well. So all in all, bad for the commodity markets and bad for the oil markets, unless of course you're a producer. But as I say, there's always a danger when those prices get too high.
All right. Okay.
I wanted to start with Russia, Mr. Wilson. We're talking earlier this morning about how Russia has tried to sort of insulate itself against sanctions, which are always going to be in the offing, with their massive foreign reserves of £460 billion, keeping their foreign reserves in dollars, only 16% in dollars, down from 40% just 5 years ago, how they have set up their SFPS in case they're kicked off SWIFT, same as China has set up their CIPS. But is there any sort of chink in Putin's armor that the West can exploit and just quickly bring about some kind of de-escalation? Is there anything that he's possibly overlooked? Because he seems ready to go for the long haul. And I also wanted to talk about Jess Staley, whose shares, 22 million pounds of shares from Barclays Bank, have been frozen. He left the bank. He was a former boss of Barclays Bank. He left the bank last year because of his links to disgraced Jeffrey Epstein. That man's, the specter of Jeffrey Epstein destroying lives and careers, even in death. What will happen with Jess Staley? There's an investigation. If the investigation finds that he did lie to the bank about his closeness to Jeffrey Epstein, what happens at that point?
I mean, you make your own conclusions about what he's going to do with the rest of his life. You're right that that Epstein has and his memory and his legacy poisons many people, and there may be more to come. I feel as though it's good to nip these things in the bud fairly early to stop them actually drawing out, and but really this is a matter for him and also whatever legal action he cares to take. As far as Russia's concerned, how will it become sanction-proof? Well, you quite rightly draw everybody's attention to the foreign reserves. I would point out, though, that 16% of that is in dollars, which is actually fallen. It has the fourth largest reserves in the world. But the most important thing, I think, is much more important than that 13% of that is in renminbi. In other words, what is China's role in this going to be? The only thing I think that would halt Russia financially is removing them from the international payment system, the SWIFT payment system, and I can't see that happening for a while, because what's happening at the moment is the sanctions are relatively weak, opening the doors for continuing diplomacy, if that's at all possible, or diplomat support.
IMF is advising the UK to tax the wealthy in order to shift the burden of inflation that is likely to rise, particularly in the face of this tension in Russia and Ukraine. Is the Chancellor likely to take that advice to protect the more vulnerable people within the society? The second question with regard to Russia, quickly, is that yes, Russia will seem to be prepared for this and has taken certain steps to protect itself. But how far do you think that Russia can go?
Well, what tends to happen these days is that in the past, as you know, big forces faced each other and did battle for territory. Things are so complicated now that I think that most people are settling in for an asymmetric war. Cybersecurity, if you place sanctions on one person, there are parties and there are counterparties, and it's very, very complicated indeed. But I think that's the sort of life that we will have. Putin is acting on his own. There's no doubt about this. And actually, government spending has fallen to about 1% increase over the past 3 years. So what he's been doing is preparing. And remember, this chap is an ex-KGB officer, so he's not easily swayed by diplomats, as Macron found to his cost a few weeks ago, and as have all the other Western leaders as well. He needs to be taken on, but the only way I think to do it, finally, you're talking about a chink in the armour, I think would be to withdraw the SWIFT payment system from Russia and isolate it that way. But I don't see that happening for a long time, because once you start doing that, there are all sorts of other consequences that start to, and as you quite rightly say, we're facing that in this country as well, with inflation rising very rapidly. The cost of living, as it is in most developing countries, is becoming a real issue now.
Rainfall or wealth taxes in the UK?
I'm sorry, I didn't understand what you meant.
No, I said IMF is advising the Chancellor that it's important for the UK to impose windfall or wealth taxes on the rich in the UK. Is he likely to take that advice in their recent review of the state of the UK economy?
I understand that. I mean, if you're talking about taxing the rich, I think that's really, whilst everybody would like to do it who's not rich, it's very, very difficult indeed, for the simple reason that most of the super rich, their money is tied up in all sorts of different ways all the way around the world. It's all right that the authorities saying this kind of thing, but in practice, it's very, very difficult to do indeed. I mean, it's a good Robin Hood thought, but I think practically it's one of those things that everybody hopes for and nobody gets in the end.
Right, thank you, Mr. Wilson. Our dependable Rotus Adiri is here to give us an African business update. Good morning, Rotus.
Good morning, Tundu. Good morning, Rufai. Good morning, Doctor. Good morning to all our viewers. Yeah, so we pick off with a chart here, as you can see where oil prices have reached at earlier after the announcement of the Russian invasion in a number of territories in Ukraine. $101.12 a barrel is where Brent crude was earlier this morning. Now, it's interesting that this is happening at this time. Timothy Silva, Minister of State for Petroleum Resources, he was on Bloomberg talking about Nigeria not talking about Nigeria, rising oil prices worrying Nigeria. It's quite a remarkable statement that Africa's largest oil producer would be worried about prices getting too high. But that's the situation we find ourselves where the doctor, I think, mentioned the landing cost of fuel, the impact that would have on subsidy payments. You can expect, if this is sustained, that the NNPC will start to make announcements about deductions from the FAC allocations as they did last year. Ideally, this is money that should be going into the excess crude account. We should be benefiting greatly from this, but the combination of low oil production from the OPEC cuts, the decrepit infrastructure, the high amount of money that we're paying for subsidies, those are a combination of factors that make higher oil prices more of a pain than pleasure for the country, and it's pretty unfortunate that that's the way it is. I think this is the first administration to say that higher oil prices are a bad thing for Nigeria. And look, we're talking about Russia. I think we have a chart on this is Russia's reserves as at 2020. 75% climb from 2015 to 2020. I think reserves now about $630 billion, which is why economic sanctions might not have an impact on them. In the meantime, they can shield themselves. I mean, this is a lesson in personal finance and savings and how, saving for a rainy day, not to absolve them of the horrible things that they're doing right now, but if you save while oil prices are high, you're going to your reserves will appreciate, and you can now withstand possible shocks from sanctions. On SWIFT, that Michael Wilson mentioned, that's what's being called the nuclear option. I don't think the U.S. I think they've backtracked from that because there's a lot of the fallout from doing that would be pretty heavy. But this, what you're seeing here is essentially how you can shield yourself from shocks when you've got a large amount of reserves. Russia being the third largest oil producer. We move to the federal, actually more oil and gas news. Oil majors Shell and Total Energies, I think they were at the Sub-Saharan African Energy Forum, where they both called for more incentives for gas exploration. Managing director of SNEPCO and also Total Energies here in Nigeria. Both of them saying that, look, Petroleum Industry Act, yes, there are some headway being made with respect to gas exploration, but I think they mentioned deep water gas exploration. There needs to be more done there to incentivize gas exploration. I think just yesterday you were talking about how disappointed you are in the fact that Nigeria isn't taking advantage of this, whereby other countries like Egypt, for instance, are taking advantage. Clement Agba, Minister of State for Budget and Planning, he was at the Federal Executive Council meeting yesterday saying that, well, not really saying anything new, just saying that Nigeria is focused on continuing the downward trajectory of inflation, committed to making sure the economy continues to grow, continues to making sure that the average Nigerian on the street feels economic developments and so on and so forth. They got a year to go. I'm not much sure how much further can be done to reduce inflation, but we will see how that goes. Finally, South Africa, Mr. Enoch Gongwana, if I pronounce his name correctly, the new Minister of Finance that took over from Tito Mboweni, I think he's only been in the job about 6 months, announced their 2022 budget, and essentially, there was a lot in there to like. Economists gave him a thumbs up. They said it was boring, but it was responsible. One of the things he mentioned, he said there's no tax hikes that will take place on South Africans. Doctor was just mentioning the IMF advising the UK and so on to raise taxes. He said it's not a good time to do it, but he gave a caveat. He said that if the economy doesn't grow as forecast, if economic growth is weak, they will have to resort to taxes. They reduced business taxes from 28% to 27%. That 1% change, I think, is results in about 200 billion rand loss. They're also going to be spending more on to get more youth into jobs and so on and so forth. You mentioned ESCOM and a couple of other things, but key here, South Africa brought in 181 billion extra rand in taxes from their forecast from last February due to what? Mining. Mining accounts for, 50-60% of the economy. And so the commodities boom really, really helped them out. So they're going to be using those savings for, I guess they said welfare and a couple other things. if you compare it to Nigeria, I think we've got some charts here. Mining's GDP. Okay, so take a look at this. Mining contracted in the fourth quarter of last year, this is Nigeria now, 6.6%. For the full year 2021, contracted by 7%. Contribution to GDP, 5.5%. If you look at a chart, you actually look at this, the second chart that shows you the movement of the mining sector. We've been in recession, look at that. Recession in 2016, popped out briefly in 2017, dropped back in 2018, popped out in 2019, we're okay, dropped back in 2020, and essentially has been in recession territory for pretty much since 2020. Nigeria is leaving so much money on the table by not adequately developing her mining sector. Yeah. Michael Wilson just mentioned Rio Tinto. That's an Australian company. Yeah. Rio Tinto, Australia's population is 25 million. Their GDP is $1.5 trillion. Mining is huge. You see what mining means to South Africa. Yeah. You see what mining means to China. You got to do better.
I mean, we've got to do better. Where do I start from? And there's so little time. Number one, at first, should the Minister of State for Finance be talking about inflation rate?
Well, he's the Minister of State for Budget and National Planning. Okay. So he was talking to newsmen after. Okay, he was talking about the general inflation and also the general.
Okay, I mean, it sounded very funny to me. But for me, when you look at what is happening today, you can see what corruption and mismanagement has done to Nigeria over the years.
And oil theft.
Yeah. 73, Yom Kippur War, we were happy because crude oil price rose from $3 per barrel to $12 per barrel. That's when Nigeria made most of its money. It was said then that the leader came out to say in Nigeria that the problem is not money, but how to spend it.
Go on,
yeah. But why is it that now crude oil prices are gone up because of another crisis in Russia? We are scared that crude oil price is going up.
Remember the Babangida era, the Gulf War windfall?
The Gulf War windfall. So it's no longer a windfall. The oil has now become a curse. You know why? Because once you don't manage things you have properly, then it becomes a curse.
Right.
And you can see countries like Venezuela. Venezuela used to have the fourth largest GDP per capita in the world in the 50s from oil. But what has happened to them? One of the poorest nations in the world today. So it goes back to the need to manage resource effectively and create new opportunities. We can create that in gas. We can build new pipelines, talk to Europe about it, explore that in mining.
Yep.
I keep saying Nigeria is a cash cow.
Huge.
But we don't see the cash. There's a lot of money on the table in Nigeria, but we're not touching that moolah.
Okay, the question is this. Why are higher oil prices bad for Nigeria? In the last 1 year, this is the second time we're hearing this, that if oil prices go up, then we're in trouble. The first person to tell us is Mele Kyari, and now Timipre Silva, saying that the comfortable zone where we can be is between $70 and $80. And in any case, a few years back, we were told, a certain administration mismanaged resources. Under their watch, oil was being sold at over $100. And then just a few years down the line, we are now being told, high oil prices.
Dr.
Do you see the irony? Do you see the contradiction?
We see it.
I agree with your point about poor leadership, poor governance systems, and the effect of our inability to take advantage of our resources. Well, what do they call it? The oil cost? Or
resource cost.
Resource cost or the Dutch disease. That's the phrase, the Dutch disease. So we've been caught up with it, right? And the question is, okay, we have other resources. Chief Timipre Silva, in that interview, was also talking about Nigeria now looking at gas. Yesterday, we talked about the Trans-Saharan gas pipeline, what they call the EAKK, the 614 kilometers pipeline that is supposed to go all the way to the Algerian border. So he says Nigeria is looking at that, and that we're trying to look at the possibility of also selling gas to Morocco. And he was asked a question about, whether we will sell gas to Europe, because now, the EU in particular, those 27 countries in the EU, they are going to suffer heavily if they block gas supplies from the largest gas station in the world, which is Russia. Nigeria could easily have taken advantage of that, but we have the infrastructure. The IOCs are no longer investing heavily. You brought up the topic. The IOCs are not happy with the Petroleum Industry Act. It's not just the gas part of it. The major parts of it, they are not happy. And that's why many of them have been closing shop and leaving. Okay? So he says he will now begin to go and talk to them. Shell, ENI, all those companies to see how they can put more investment in Nigeria. Do we need the Russian-Ukraine tension to realize that we'll be in very serious trouble? As for mining, yes, there are mining resources. They also call it solid minerals development in Nigeria. We have a map, a geoscience map of mineral resources in Nigeria, and there's a lot there that is rich. I recall once we went to Australia. Australia has a thriving mining sector, and we agreed with the Australians that they will come to Nigeria to come and help us. I think we even signed some bilateral agreements with the Australians and the biggest mining company in Australia. Nothing has happened since then. Because even when these ideas come up, whether they come from the technocrats or whoever, Nigeria lacks the capacity to follow through. And we have a lot of trained people here who could benefit from some of these opportunities. We've just been focusing on oil. The same oil now, we are lamenting. And yet we are helpless. We are not in a position to stop the Russian-Ukrainian tension. We are not even on the Security Council. We don't have a veto power in the matter.
In the first place.
So countries like us will suffer.
Gabon.
Subsidy will go up.
Yes.
It will.
Now, if NNPC or the federal government of Nigeria is not in a position to further extend what is already over 3 trillion naira subsidy.
2.55.
It's 3 trillion.
It was 440 something billion.
3.4 trillion.
Okay, 2.55.
3.4 trillion.
3.4 trillion.
Now, if that happens, then it's you and I. In fact, we may start trekking very soon.
Good exercise. It's good exercise.
This is exactly why I bristled when President Muhammadu Buhari said, when Oji had that story, thanks to him, Nigerians are not trekking. Really? I'm thinking I might have spoken too soon there. I think we might
continue the trekking very soon.
Yes, that's why I didn't take that very kindly. And also, back to the mismanagement. Why did it take 20 years to pass the PIA? This is why a lot of the provisions are obsolete. A lot of the provisions do not capture the current reality.
Exactly.
It's so oil-centric and not focused on gas.
There you go.
Just for the record, it took us another 25 years to build a gas pipeline from here to Morocco and even think of shipping up to Europe. It's a 25-year project, and it will cost about $25 billion.
That's almost our budget.
So it's in the pipeline.
It's in the pipeline.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Doctor.